Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, a podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
And today we're going to give our hot take review on the game we just finished playing, Cyclades. Before we do, we're going to talk about some poll results. Every week on social media, specifically on our Facebook group, you can find us, ask a poll question. We'd love for you to respond and chat with us about it. So this week I asked the question, do you store your board games horizontal or vertical? And the options I gave and the responses we got: horizontal, we got 25.3%, vertical was 35.4%, and I mix and match was 39.2%. So lots of people that go both ways, but verticals took a slight lead over horizontal. Chris, how do you store your board games?
I was solidly in the both camp, and partly because it ends up fitting better that way, but also because my non-gamer but very aesthetically minded wife, when I first got my shelves set up, said, well, if we're going to have this sitting out in the middle of the house where everybody can see it, we're going to arrange it in the most artistically appropriate way to make for an attractive room. I think actually it came out really nice, and that was a combination of vertical and horizontal stacked on top of each other. I think it was great.
That's really interesting. Well, what's interesting, Chris, that you said that, because a lot of people responded that they preferred vertical because it just looks better, because everything's kind of even and straight. And whenever I see shelfies with like a mix and match where people are kind of slotting things wherever they fit, it always seems cluttery and messy to me. But you guys kind of have like standing shelves out in the middle of your room. So I assume it's like a few stacked on top and then a few vertical next to it or something like how does that look good? Like you gotta maybe you know what you need to do, Chris? Don't even answer this. I want you to take a selfie, share it with me on social media, and we'll post it the day that this episode releases.
Okay, I will. But I do feel like I need to at least answer that. It's kind of like when you have like the three little vases that are stacked next to each other on a shelf, and they're all different shapes and sizes. You know, it's like that kind of a thing.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I do that with books. Like in our public bookshelves, we kind of have books. You know, you got a few of the same color stacked on top, and then a few side by side. So I can see that. I just haven't seen it pulled off well with board games. So I'm excited to see that shelfie. Personally, everything I've got is vertical. And it's mainly for aesthetics. I think it's just nice that, like, I don't know, I'm kind of OCD. So I like everything kind of all the same height. So I've got one shelf that's all, you know, the normal 12 by 12 box, and then one shelf that's all the normal like 9 by 13 box, all on their sides. And so everything's got the same height across it. And yeah, it's for aesthetics for me, but it is kind of a pain in the butt sometimes, you know, to have, like, obviously some games just, they don't store well. And so I'm always like, I'm pushing them up against each other so that one doesn't start to open up a little bit and have all the components fall out of their trays and things like that.
But Tim, here's the problem. Then you had these games like One Deck Galaxy, these like really small box games, or Welcome To. What do you do with those?
I have a little tiny shelf over to the side of my game room that just has a bunch of little small games packed in there, and they are different sizes. So, but they're not on my main game shelves that are all stacked neatly with even sizes. In fact, I'm kind of at the point right now where my shelf I just got Grandha Deluxe Edition, and it filled in the last spot on my like main shelves. So it means I can't get any more games until something's got to leave if I get any other standard size box games, because I don't have anywhere else to put it.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so here's how some people answered. So Ryan Wilms said, vertical. I admit, super annoying when the game spills out all over the inside of the box, but worth it for making the collection look aesthetically much more pleasing. Oh, the thing I forgot to mention too, the other reason I don't like to do horizontal, if you want to get a game out, you got to pull like 3 other games off the top first.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid of like crushing the boxes, but I'm suspecting that's not as bad of an issue as I think it is. But that's one of the other reasons why I've always stacked vertically. Christopher Larry said, Tim, I'd say you created the perfect list of choices, but someone is bound to prove me wrong. I chose mix and match because I own too many games and need to pressure test my Calyx design and strength. Thank you, Christopher. You're the first person that ever told me I had a perfect poll list of choices, and nobody's contradicted me yet. So thank you for that. Jen Cam Plays Board Games said, depends on the insert. I prefer vertical, but when I open a box and everything is a mess, it makes me so sad. Yes, first world problems, I know. Yeah, I agree with you, Jen. And my solution for that is always like, if the insert sucks, throw the insert out, put everything in baggies. It doesn't matter which way you store it. So most games, I think you can fix it and get them vertical and working well. All right, cool. Well, I hope I didn't ask that question before. I told Chris right before we started that I had like a nagging in my head that I'd ask this question. So if I have, give us a comment on social media, let me know. But hey, we get to come back and revisit it. I think that's a very important board gamer question right there. All right, well, let's jump into a game description of Cyclades.
In Cyclades, 2 to 6 players lead mythological Greek factions in a bid to control the islands of the Cyclades archipelago. We'll be talking about the Cyclades Legendary Edition, which is currently a subject of a Kickstarter campaign that's going to be live until August 8th. So if you like what you hear tonight, go ahead and check it out. Now back to the game. Cyclades takes place over a series of rounds that begin with a bid for the favors of the gods. These favors are the primary way that you're going to take actions, with each god providing some benefit. So, for example, Ares, the god of war, provides the opportunity to place fortresses and troops, as well as an ability to move troops. Poseidon, the god of the seas, lets players do the same with ports and ships. And Hera, the goddess of wisdom, provides the ability to recruit philosophers and place universities. Once the bidding's done, the action moves to the main board, which is laid out as a map of the islands, with both sea and islands broken down into discrete geographic regions. Players place their buildings, troops, and ships, and as in many area control games, control of an area provides benefits. Also, as in many area control games, if 2 or more players occupy the same territory, there's going to be a rumble. However, unlike many area control games, the goal of Cyclades isn't to wipe out your opponents or to win the most battles, though that certainly does help, but rather it's to control 3 metropolises. These megacities are placed on the board when a player has one of each of the other 4 building types: ports, fortresses, universities, and temples, and there's a few other ways to place metropolises as well. There's a number of other mechanisms that come into play, like deploying heroes and monsters that provide powerful benefits, as well as recruiting priestesses and philosophers, but we'll dig into those a little more during the game discussion. But regardless of the mechanism, they all serve the central goal of building and controlling metropolises. And at the end of a round, if a player controls 3, that player will be declared the winner. Cyclades Legendary Edition was designed by Ludovic Malblanc and Bruno Cathala and is published by Open Sesame Games.
Thanks for the description, Chris. It's funny. Just last week, I mentioned that we rarely ever cover games that are on Kickstarter, and then we did one last week, and here we are doing it again. But I do have an explanation on this one, and that is that we have actually been wanting to play Cyclades as a group for a long time, and the only reason we held out for the last year or so is because we knew that this new kind of revised edition was going to be coming to Kickstarter. Thought it would be helpful for everybody if we got a chance to play and talk about it right while the Kickstarter is happening. So once this is released, I think there's only a few days or maybe a week or so to still back it, but there's always late pledges and things like that. So if you're really excited about it after this conversation, should be able to find it. Also, I'm excited that we don't expect the gameplay to change much. This is a game that's been around for about 10 years or so. And, they might have done some minor revisions to the rules or whatever, but I think we're playing the game that's been around. So if you want to get the game immediately, you can probably find a copy of the existing Cyclades, buy it secondhand or whatever, and start playing it. With all that said, we're going to jump into the gameplay and mechanisms, and I'm going to start here. This is an interesting topic because we have talked about Eric Lang's trilogy of area control games, and then there was also I think this was Matago that originally published all 3 of these, but there is another trilogy of area control games, which includes Innis, Kemet, and Cyclades. And this is the final one that we have not, as a group, played. Chris, you never played Kemet, though, did you?
I did. I played it once.
Oh, you did? Okay, great. So this is the final of this trilogy, and so it's kind of been a little bit of a grail game for me to want to get played, just so that we could kind of compare all the trilogies. So I think, I'll be circling back to that in my final thoughts and kind of how this compares for both of these 2 trilogies and the other games in them. But my favorite part about this, I think, was the action bidding on this. This is a really unique, fairly simple mechanism where every round there's an action available for the number of players. So in our game, we played a 3-player game, and there's always one basic action, a really simple one that just gets you kind of income. But then there's always 2 varying actions that are going to rotate depending on how many people are playing. And so then you're bidding on those. It was fun. It was a cool decision, just really quick. Hey, I'm going to bid 5. I think he's only got 7. This is all hidden behind a board, so you don't know how much money other people do. I think I can outbid him. But then once you bid the action and you start taking it, a lot of the things you're going to get, you have to pay more money for. So you have to be careful about bidding too much and spending all your money so you can't get all the benefits. I thought that was really fun. It was fun that the actions rotated, so everything couldn't be done every time. And it was always an interesting competition.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly that action selection mechanism was the headline of this game. A lot of what was happening in Cyclades was actually pretty standard fare for area control games. And that's not to say bad. I mean, a lot of it was stuff that, the things we love about area control games. But this is the thing to me that really stood out. And it's hard to overstate the degree to which it impacts how you play this game, because not only are you going to have to bid for these actions, but not every action is going to be available at every time, at every turn, because for us in our game, there were 3 players, and so we had 3 gods available. So there were 2 rotating gods, and there was one who's always the same. Apollo always gives you the opportunity, like you said, Tim, to get income and to place some benefit tokens. But the others, all the ones that let you place troops, that let you place ships, that let you build buildings, all of that stuff, completely rotating. So for example, I think it was maybe the second round, I had these big plans about how I wanted to go out and start taking things over, but I couldn't because there was no way to actually put troops out on the board. But on the other hand, what that meant was I was able to hold back and not defend some areas that were pretty important to me for a little while, because I knew that nobody else was going to be able to do that either. So you really had to make some strategic choices when you were, seeing the layout and saying that you're not going to get an opportunity to do troop movement, say for 3 turns. So what do you do in the meantime to get yourself set up? And then, of course, one of the great things that you can do is take income when you know that the next turn you really need to be the first player, because the income, the Apollo action, is always going to make you the first player in the next round. So there's some really neat ways to dig into that action selection mechanism. One other thing I do want to say about that real quick, it did remind me a little bit of Pan Am. And I mentioned that at the beginning, and you said that you had kind of some similar thoughts.
Yeah.
The difference is in Pan Am, those same actions are going to be available every round. So it's a little bit less impactful. Here, it was truly critical to everything you were planning out for your turns.
Yeah, totally. So the other thing I wanted to mention here was the monsters. There's this little market of monsters. Now, one of the actions that might come up and you could bid on would allow you to just like pay 1 coin for the top monster off the deck. But otherwise, there was always this market of monsters. The lowest one cost 2, 3, 4, and 5 coins. So there was varying prices on them, but it was this rotating row. So every game you're going to see different monsters at different times. And most of the actions, except for the Apollo action, most of them actions would let you, as one of the optional actions, that are just pay the market cost for them with a reduction in price if you had a temple. And that was always a fun choice. I mean, they could get really expensive, and that money's important. And so even if there was a cool monster up there, sometimes you couldn't afford it or you didn't want to pay for it. But really cool just to have these fun effects. And so the monsters were interesting here because some of them were like minis that you would put out on the board and they would have some impact on the board presence. But others were just a one-time effect, and they were cool. It was cool artwork of these little monsters that would just like, okay, move all your troops from one spot to another, take a priestess from another character, whatever, just like one-time effects that were fun. So just a fun little addition to every time someone's taken an action, they might get this little bonus thing that was going to shift up every time. It's been a while since we talked about one of these rotating row kind of markets of actions you could take, but I've always had fun with them when they've been available, and this game was no exception. It added some real fun to it.
In those monsters, one of the things that actually made me think of as you were describing it, Tim, was how they acted as a little bit of a wild card. So, For example, when I was talking about, if Ares is 3 turns away from showing up, I'm going, okay, well, I don't really have to defend myself right now because no one's going to be able to move and attack me until 3 turns later when Ares is in play. But, then Pegasus pops up in the trade row, and Pegasus lets you move troops from anywhere in the board to anywhere else in the board. Now, I don't think it ended up really happening this way in the game, but I totally saw a couple scenarios where if someone had managed to get the right Pegasus at the right time, then actually, I take back what I said. I did use Pegasus to take over one of Steve's territories.
That's right.
That got me a metropolis. Now, I wish that it actually resulted in anything like a win, but at least I got that one building and that got me the metropolis. So I actually did get a chance to do that. And that was at a time when Ares wasn't available. So I was able to use the wild card to do something pretty cool. Didn't get me the game, but it got me a pretty cool turn.
It was actually funny because that Pegasus was up for several turns in a row and no one was buying it. And I had I had like an island down in the bottom corner where I just had a control token. I had no troops. I had like a couple buildings on it. I had a couple income on it. And I was just like, please don't take this from me. And anyone could have taken it with like one troop, and nobody used that Pegasus to do it. So yeah, that is one of the fun things about it, is I think you can't plan for everything. It's going to introduce some unique stuff that's going on here. The other one that was similar is that there's a heroes that you can purchase, when there's like a little market of 2 of those as well. And those also add a little bit of variety, as well as unique endgame conditions, which in the game description, you talked about one of the endgame conditions is just having 4 different types of buildings there. And that's cool. The heroes also all have a unique way to turn into not endgame conditions, but turn into at least one of the metropolises, which would result in, if you have 3 of them, you get endgames. So that was cool. And then there was also the other action that let you get philosophers. And if you got 4 philosophers, you could only get a max of 2 in a turn. But if you got 4 of them, that would also get you a metropolis. So I thought it was really good and probably important that it wasn't just about fighting for those metropolises, that there were alternate ways that people could put one together, and it just didn't turn into a back and forth like I think some of these area controls where the end game is just control of areas. And I think that really worked here.
A lot of that meant that there were things happening that, unless you were paying really close attention, you wouldn't necessarily catch. Like Steve popped up with 3 metropolises out of nowhere because he was able to purchase 2 philosophers in a turn, and he already had 2. And neither of us really saw that coming. And then he had another one that he got by turning in one of his heroes when he had 7 territories. So he really made good use of those cards. So
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. They also gave you some benefits in combat. And another thing that they could do was move troops around, which is another way that you could sort of get around that lack of an action. So you could use your hero, which was available through a different god, I think a couple different gods even maybe, to move some of those troops that you otherwise would have been stuck with sitting around waiting for Ares to show back up again.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Right. If there were heroes on the board, then all of a sudden combats can happen all the time. They can happen every round, because that was an action that most of the actions would let you do. Yeah. So, kind of moving away from gameplay mechanisms a little bit, or not specific mechanisms, but just the feel of the game. This game felt very, I would say, lighter than most of the games in this series, or even in the Eric Lang trilogy. And one of the things we like about Eric Lang's trilogy is that they're fairly streamlined. I don't know why, but this even felt a little bit simpler to me. It almost, man, I don't even want to say it, but it almost felt a little bit more like Small World weight than it did, Rising Sun weight. And maybe it's not. It's probably similar to those other ones, but it just seems so easy to understand, so easy to get into. And I think it was a good thing. We've been playing a lot of heavy games recently, and I was just looking forward to a game that we could just kind of sit down and dive right into and just have a good time with. And this game did that for me. So I liked that the weight here was pretty approachable. It's pretty easy to get into.
Yeah, I think I must have mentioned 4 or 5 times over the course of the game. I made comments like, wow, this thing just flows so smoothly. It seemed so simple. And I don't mean simple, like I think the same way that you meant simple.
Yeah.
Not that it was overly simple or there wasn't strategic depth to it, but that it was so easy to just roll through a round and make all the stuff happen that you needed to. Now, one thing that I think is worth noting, in particular, because we keep comparing this, and rightly so, to the Eric Lang trilogy, is that when Eric Lang puts out a game, one of the first things you look for is, what is the combat mechanism he's using?
Yeah.
And he always comes up with these brilliant combat mechanisms. This was probably the most unexciting combat mechanism you can possibly have. And that was just, you roll 1 die each. And then if whoever has the highest in combat zone power, so each of your troops is 1 or 2 if you have a hero or something like that. And if you have a fortress, then maybe you get an extra power. But you roll a die, and whoever's power is higher based on the modifier of the die wins, kills 1 ship or 1 troop from the other player. And you keep going like that, almost like Risk.
It was Risk. I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, until somebody either backs away or somebody's dead. But the funny thing is, I didn't think it hurt the game. I actually thought it was a little bit of a relief not having to be too clever, not having to think too hard about the combat, and really being able to just say, you know what? I'm going to get in there. I'm going to roll a die. Hope I do well. In this game, I was like the man with the golden dice for like the first 3 combats. I was like rolling 3s every time, which is the highest number. And then that all fell apart and I ended up getting killed. But I actually didn't think it hurt this game. I mean, how did you feel about that? Do you think it helped or hurt or neither?
I think it was great for some reason. I thought it was perfect, and I can't exactly explain it because you're right. We've complained about Risk combat, but this one, was even a little simpler than Risk. Risk is like you can roll a max of 3 die or 2 die depending on how many troops you have. It's 1 die each. You just add it to the power, and I think it's because the strategic decisions was the bidding, right? Like you have to focus on where are you putting your brain power into a game?
Yeah,
and this game was not putting the brain power into the combat. It's like you could go into a combat with pretty good idea that, hey, if I go against one ship and I've got 3 ships, most likely I'm going to win here. Not necessarily. There's a little bit of surprise. There's a little bit of excitement, but it gave you, a good chance of knowing what the outcome of the game was with a little bit of randomness to it. But it happened so quick. And it's like Root too. I've complained about Root's combat, but it was kind of like with Root, both people have a die that they're working off of. But then there's all these side rules like, well, if you're the Woodland Alliance, you do this. Nope. This one it didn't matter what kind of units you had in there. It didn't matter who it was, a die roll on each side. And that dictates whether a unit gets lost. Really simple. It did not detract from the game for me either, Chris. So I'm interested. It's interesting to me that you said the same thing because I was wondering how you'd feel about that.
Well, I was just going to say your point was very well said, that this is about where you're putting your thought in the game. And as you were saying it, I was just thinking that myself. I mean, when you're playing Blood Rage, I'm just going to compare it to Blood Rage, which is another game where, with a relatively simple set of mechanisms, but a more complex combat. You can be stacked to the gills with combat power in Blood Rage and still get slaughtered if you aren't clever enough in how you play the combat and how you select your cards and what you do. You could have the card that says, kill everything except 1 troop from each player. And then maybe somebody cancels that out, or maybe they don't. There's so much deep thinking to be done there. Here, it was almost a relief that I'm going to chuck a die.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to win if I have more troops.
Yep, totally.
That actually felt kind of nice.
There was just one combat where it was the opposite, and I had more troops, I think, with boats. Chris ended up winning that combat. But so just one out of the whole night where the outcome wasn't predetermined. But sometimes, like you could get a tie and then both people would lose a ship. So even if the winner was there, they still would have lost something from it. So Yep. Super quick. Great. I'm glad you called that out. Let's talk about the production and theme of Cyclades. I'm going to start by just saying that I think the artwork that was used in this game is pretty much my ideal perfect style of board game artwork. I just love this kind of mix of like classic, almost like cell animation style with just a little bit of darkness to it, a little bit of elevation. Just perfect artwork for me. If I could have this artwork in every single board game, this would probably be the style that I would pick most of the time because it was colorful. It was fun. The board was colorful. The cards were color. Everything just looked fun and cool on the board. And so I love the artwork that was used here.
Dude, I mean, I feel like I need to make a hot take. You're wrong. It sucked. The art was horrible. I hated the art here. No, actually, I loved it. I completely agree with you on that. This art was just about right. And I've said this in a couple of games recently. In fact, I just said this last week. If anything, I wish there was more of it. I mean, and here there was not a shortcoming. I mean, here there was no shortcoming. Like there was no place where they left the art, nothing was left blank. I just loved looking at it so much. I wish there was more things to cycle through. I wish I could look at more of the cards. I wish I could see more stuff. I wish there was more stuff on player boards, that sort of thing. I found that absolutely delightful. Classic cell animation is a good way of putting it because I don't like it when art is too cartoony and too goofy.
Yeah.
This one was not. This one I felt like I was watching a classic animated feature, and I found it to be absolutely delightful. And needless to say, I mean, there is some high quality sculpts on the minis in this game as well. I would love to see these in real life. We played with Tabletopia, which is, of course, suboptimal when you're playing this kind of a game with big pieces and stuff. But I'd love to see the way that looks in real life too.
Well, I'm going to talk about that in a second. But before I do, we happen to have a guest that just popped in here. Adam showed up out of the blue, jumped into our recording here. And Adam, I know you didn't get to play with us tonight. What do you think of the artwork of Cyclades Legendary Edition? I'm sure you've looked at it at this point.
Hey guys, how you doing? I'm on. I just wanted to test my new mic. I got the baby to bed, Sarah, so it's just me and the kids. So baby's asleep. I had some time to jump on. The art looks amazing. It looks like The Little Mermaid, but it looks fantastic. So it looks like that era of Disney art almost. You've got these aquatic Hellenic figures, especially this mermaid. It looks like Ursula-esque, and you've got the Chiron shooting this bow and arrow. It looks like Ariel's dad down there underneath the water. So it looks fantastic. I very much enjoyed this art. How are you guys doing? How was the game? What happened?
Great. And you heard it here first, people. The killer Greek Little Mermaid, straight from Adam's mouth.
And Adam, we're not to our final thoughts yet, so we're not going to tell you how the game was. You're going to get there you're going to come along this journey with us if you stick around. If not, you get to listen to the recording later on.
All right.
Okay, but so Chris, you mentioned the minis, and I want to call this out because this is a Kickstarter actually that comes with two different options. It's got the meeple version and it's got the miniature version. The way we played on Tabletopia was with basically what was like a miniature version of it, right? It was like all little minis for the figures and stuff like that. And here's the deal. I'm tired of looking at gray plastic. Now, the miniatures in this, the player colors are all unique colors, and I think even unique sculpt for the fight, the warriors as well as for the boats, and that's cool. But then all the monsters are all these big gray blobs of plastic. Could I paint them? Yes, I could. I'll probably never get to it though. I'm tempted that I almost wonder if I wouldn't prefer the meeple version of this. And I like it. It adds color, and even the monsters are like meeple monsters. Like they only show a few of them on the Kickstarter page here. But
well, time out, Tim. Time out. You're calling them meeples, but I don't think that does it justice. These are standees. Well, they have standees. Maybe there's meeples too.
Oh, they do have standees. You're right. You're right. They're standees for the monsters on these. Just meeples for the.
Oh, okay. But now I see the thousands and thousands of. But they're not your traditional grotesque looking meeple shape a la Carcassonne. These are actually nice little sculpts, little warrior looking guys and little ships. So I just want to make sure that's clear for the layman.
Oh, you know what? Thank you for calling that out because I could have sworn I saw actual like meeples for the monsters. And now that you're saying that, now I kind of don't want standees. So I'm changing my mind. I think maybe the miniatures are the way to go here. In any case.
Oh boy.
Finally, there's something I can disagree with Tim on in this episode because I don't feel like I'm doing my job if I'm agreeing with everything you say.
Yeah, that's a bummer. Yeah, I don't like standees very much. So I think I'd have a hard time.
Well, I got to say, you said I'm tired of looking at big blobs of gray plastic. I miss looking at big blobs of gray plastic. All we ever play around here is Euro games. All I ever get to play at home is Euro games. Nobody ever wants to play big gray blob of plastic games with me. So I miss it a lot.
Yeah, I'm in. Well, miniatures for me as well. They also have a deluxe edition of this too, where even like the buildings, which are nice artwork on little chits that represent the buildings, but they're actually like 3D buildings. So yeah, great production. I mean, honestly, for me, as far as board games go, this is top tier. Like this is about all I could expect from a board game production from everything I'm seeing here. Not only we played on Tabletopia, of course, which isn't a great view, but I watched the John Gates Games how to play video in any case, and he had a prototype version that showed a lot of the artwork and the figures and stuff like that. So I feel like I got a pretty good sense for what this game looks like and how it's going to feel. I like it. All right, well, let's jump into our final thoughts on this and ask the question, would you request to play it again? And again, this is a game that's been around for a while, so you don't have to talk about backing it on Kickstarter, but are you tempted? And I'm going to start. I really like this game. It was very streamlined. I knew it after just watching the how to play video and reading through the rule book that this was going to be a game that would be fun. And it was fun. It was very fun. It was quick turns, easy decisions, but fun decisions. The bidding's fun. The surprises that happen, the choices that people make, moving troops around and getting in combats or stealing stuff from you or whatever. Just always fun decisions here. And what I did not go into tonight thinking that I would want to back this game, but I really want to back this game. I really want to get this. Why am I back? Maybe I should just wait until it's on retail, but I don't know. I think I'm going to have a hard time not press and pledge on this over the next week. I had such a fun time playing this. I think this game is very approachable. I think I could play this with a lot of people, but I think our group would have a blast playing this. This would be like a con regular. Chris, you don't even have to make alliances here. It's like even a game that a Chris could love.
Even a Chris
might like this one.
So I think for me, this was a great game. Now I am going to talk about a little bit of comparing this with Kemet and Inish and the Eric Lane trilogy. But before I do, Chris, why don't you tell us, what would you request to play this game again?
Oh, boy. Yes, absolutely. I would request to play this game again. I thought it was fun from beginning to end. I thought it was a beautiful game. I thought it was streamlined. I think Adam's going to love it. Yeah, I really encourage Adam to try this one. I think he's really going to like. The only thing that I did not like about this game, I think the whole Control 3 Metropolises thing is a lame way. It's a lame end game condition, but whatever. I didn't think it made for an unfun game. We played that kind of thing in other games, and I don't find that the most exciting way to get a victory. But whatever. I mean, I had a lot of fun playing the game the whole time. I, like you, did not have any intention going into tonight of backing this thing because I'm like, I've already got too many area control games as it is. I've already got Blood Rage, which is my all-time favorite. I just recently got Eclipse, which is, it's area control in a 4X style. So I've got games like that. I got Wonderland's War. What in the world would I do with another one of these, area control games that I rarely get played as it is? But I had so much fun playing this tonight. That doesn't change the fact that I'd have a really hard time getting it played, but I actually think it may be a little easier to get this game played than it would be some others because of the simplicity of it.
Yeah.
Like, this is a game I could almost bust out for non-gamers. I'm not sure it quite crosses the Rubicon into non-gamer friendly territory, but maybe it does, and it moves so smoothly, so easily. I think we played tonight with a lot of rules checks and, 3 of us. And it took us, less than 2 hours?
Just a little under,
Yeah,
under 2 hours. And again, first play for all of us, with none of us having read the rule book. We all had watched a how to play video. So we kind of just had to check the rule book for setup, and we had to check the rule book for oh wait, what happens here? Right. But after we played it this one time, I would never have to check the rule book again.
Right.
If I taught it, there'd be no time spent doing that at all.
So for me, hands down, yes, I would ask to play this one again. Am I going to back it? I'm going to have to do a little bit of soul searching because my heart says yes, my head says no. I'm going to have to see which one wins out.
Chris, you might have to give me kind of a final, whether you back it or not, because one of us needs to back it and get this to a con. It won't be for 2 years probably, but at some point it'd be a blast to play this legendary or full edition, the ultimate pledge on this with the sculpted buildings and all that stuff.
Okay, guys, I just got here. Why are you guys so high on this game? Give me the 1 minute elevator pitch for why this game's so great.
It was fun, man. It was the action selection was, the bidding for the action selection, the little market of monsters you could buy that would give you different effects every turn or different ongoing effects. Just everything about it was streamlined, was fun. Bruno Catala is one of my favorite designers. In fact, I think I mentioned him in our favorite designers episode. And this feels like a Bruno Catala game, but all of his games they're in different worlds. This one is the area control game that he clearly had his hand in. Streamlined, fun, exciting, 3 to 6 players will play briskly. Your turns took a minute each, and then it's on to the next person. And then you get to the next phase of what's the next action coming up? What are the next cards coming into the market? And it's just exciting all the time.
You just fly through this thing. And the coolest thing is that you don't have the same actions available every turn, that the gods rotate through, creating different action opportunities. So, I don't want to suggest, Adam, that you're that easy to, pin down, but I think you're going to love this one. I think you'd really like this game.
All right, I'm backing it right now, guys. You guys convinced me. Here we go. So is this the smartphone ink killer, Tim? Is that what's happening here?
Well, for me, it's definitely a smartphone ink killer. I mean, as much as I like that game, this is not smartphone ink, but it's similar. It's very streamlined. It plays high player count, plays quickly. So I mentioned I wanted to compare it to some of the other games in the Matago area control trilogy, as well as Eric Lang's trilogy. This is a clear winner for me in the Matago trilogy. I really liked Kemet, but Kemet was so focused on just combat every round. This doesn't feel like this. There's other things to do. There's engine building that happens. There's fun decisions. And Inish just, I felt, gets a little bit redundant with that push and pull of as soon as you see someone's about to get that win condition, let's got to take it away from them. This was just a more fun game of that trilogy. I would say this is very comparable to me after first play. Blood Rage and Rising Sun, and those are my two kind of the fun games in that trilogy for me. Ankh being a little bit drier, a little bit heavier. I think this felt very similar. I would say after a couple plays, I think this could be right up there with this is so hard to say, with Blood Rage for me as far as an area control game. So
simmer down there, hotshot. Let's not go crazy here.
What do you think, Chris? How would you rank it against all those other great area control games?
Ooh boy, it's tough because they do actually scratch a slightly different itch to me. Because if I want to feel clever, then I want to play Blood Rage because I love the card play and feeling like, I'm going head to head with you in a combat. trying to, outsmart the other player. This is a game, it's more like, I don't know, it's like a battle royal. It's like everybody just get out there, start building things, start fighting, start rolling some dice. It doesn't feel to me like there's any of that.
Yeah.
The need for clever strategizing like you do with the combat in Blood Rage. So it's much more streamlined and much more simple. And I think that scratches a slightly different itch.
You reminded me another thing, Chris, even though I did have a lot of fun with it and I'm raving about the game right now, is that one of the other things I like about Blood Rage is that the engine building of, kind of building up your unique tableau as you draft over the course of the game. And this doesn't really have that kind of,
True.
You have some things, there's a couple monsters that will be persistent, or your hero might be persistent or whatever, but this doesn't really have that kind of engine building. So I agree, it's missing that a little bit. This is probably lighter than all of those other games.
Yeah.
And, good in some ways because of it's easy to get into, but still really fun. So, and maybe it feels a little bit of its time, in that like a lot of games in the early 2010s, late 2000s were, fairly straightforward mechanisms and simple, sometimes in a good way, but sometimes something about modern, like adding a little bit of complexity has brought modern board games and made them more interesting. And so this might be missing some of that like really interesting stuff, but it still worked really well for me, I think.
Yeah.
So okay, I think it bridges that gap well. I think it's kind of a classic and a game I'm really excited that I finally got a chance to play.
Are you convinced, Adam?
I don't know. I'm looking at it. The Ultimate Pledge, $133 for all the plastic, and the Meeple Pledge, $66. Man, that's hard to pass up. $66 for a game that's this good.
Yeah, right. And I do think it'd still be, even with I wish it wasn't standees, but even with the standees, I think that the rest of it, and then honestly, the monsters are not out there that often.
It's true.
You're going to see those standees like 3 or 4 in a game, basically. That's why you don't need all the miniatures. I think I am actually kind of leaning back towards that basic pledge. I think it'd still be just as fun that way. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling in a week or so.
Better think quick. It ain't sticking around forever.
All right, cool. Well, let's jump into some games that have been on our table, and it looks like Adam's here to join us. So I hope he's got something exciting to talk about.
We'll see.
We'll be back right after this. All right, welcome back. Let's talk about a couple games that have been on our table this week.
So the game that was on my table this week, ironically, was not one of the 5 games that I bought. I had 2 Kickstarters that came in and 3 games that I purchased, all of which were very exciting games to me, but I didn't get any of those played. Instead, I played Arkham Horror, the board game, not to be confused with Arkham Horror, the card game, which Tim has talked about quite a bit. This is the board game version. And I had some mixed feelings about it. First of all, I love Cthulhu. I love anything that has Cthulhu, that has pictures of Cthulhu. And of course, this has got Cthulhu all over the place. Adam is yawning at the very thought of Cthulhu because he's just not a true believer like I am. But it just happened that I had friends in town. One of them wanted to play a board game. And we went to Mox Boarding House, which is our friendly local game store here, and purchased Arkham Horror, the board game. And so we committed to playing it the next day. And I don't think I'd ever seen a setup and rule set that was quite so dense as this one. I mean, I was actually shocked that it was only rated a 3.6 or something like that on the BGG complexity scale, because after an hour of sitting there trying to figure this thing out, setting it up at the table, we decided to convene to the TV room to watch a rules video, which was a 3-part rules video, which lasted roughly an hour and a half to get to understand the game. And then once we actually sat down and started playing it, even then we had like constant rules checks. And it was, I will have to say, it's a little fiddly for my taste. It also has a relatively lean production. Lots of cards, It's basically like a 40-pound box of cardboard. Unfortunately for me, I've already played Cthulhu Death May Die. And so what this felt like was a much more complicated, much less streamlined, much less aesthetically pleasing version of Cthulhu Death May Die. And I mean, I guess that's not super shocking because, Simon puts out really attractive games, and Eric Lang is one of my favorite game designers of all time. So it's unsurprising that I would like Cthulhu Death May Die. But this game just did a lot of the same things that Death May Die did, but I thought did them in a more complicated and challenging way. Now, that's not to say there was no fun to be had. It's a cooperative game, and so we did a lot of cooperating and did a lot of planning and got to do some fun stuff, and you get to turn over these clues, and there's a branching storyline, which I think is probably the one thing where this game maybe did stand out in a way that was different than Cthulhu Death May Die. In Cthulhu Death May Die, you essentially know what your mission is. You go out and you try to do it. You start this game not actually knowing what your mission is going to be. You start with a scenario and you launch into it and you get clues, and then there's a branching storyline depending on what you accomplish or what you fail at or whatever. And so we actually, after 2, maybe 3 hours of playing it, didn't even get to the first branch of the storyline. So I'm not entirely sure what would have happened if we had. And I suspect that a lot of the slowness there was our own having to go back and check things and second guess ourselves on rules and stuff like that. Unfortunately, that left me with a little bit of a sad flavor in my mouth, wishing that we were playing Cthulhu Death May Die. I hope it brought our friends some joy. And it definitely was a game that I'd be willing to play it again to see about the storyline, because I feel like if there's anything I missed that might have been some fun in there, that might have been more fun, it was that branching storyline. So I'm curious, have either of you tried this one, or is this neither? I know, Tim, you've done the card game.
Yeah, I've only played the card game. I have not played the board game.
I was going to ask the same if Tim had played this one. I know you played the card game before, Tim, but I'm looking at the pictures here, and yeah, it looks like a setup fest. So did your friend end up having a good time, or how'd you decide to play this one? How was that agreement reached?
So we went to the game store and they wanted to buy a game, ended up getting this one. And so we had sort of committed to, whatever you get, we're going to play.
Okay.
And so that's the one we did.
Well, man, this is more and more and more. This is the type of game I want to stay away from. I know you have Batman Gotham City Chronicles, which I'm wondering if that's like a similar kind of mess fest to get that one going. Do you suspect I guess both of you guys have tried Batman Gotham City Chronicles. Do you think how does it compare with the setup and getting it going? What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
I don't see the comparison that much. I can see where I can see where the question is coming from. I didn't feel that they were similar. And honestly, it's been so long since I played Gotham City Chronicles. Maybe it really is like that, and I'm just forgetting it. Tim, what do you think? Maybe you remember it better than I do.
And that's Chris's number 12 game of all time, and he clearly didn't like this. So which one you like more.
And part of it is that I think the production is just outstanding in Gotham City Chronicles, and I'm heavily invested in the IP, as I guess I am with Cthulhu as well. But Tim, I mean, did you see that kind of similarity there?
No, not really. No, it's a different game. Batman is a kind of a tactical game. This is a co-op kind of a dungeon crawler. I'd say this is probably more comparable to. I was even thinking of Star Wars Outer Rim, just in that the way that like all of the flavor is like on cards, right? So you move around to different locations and then you reveal a card. I haven't played it, but that's just I'm looking at it and I remember hearing something about it before. Yeah. So I feel like it's kind of that. It's like Fantasy Flight saying like we're gonna load everything we can into the theme here. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to play. It doesn't matter how fiddly the rules are, but you're going to feel like every time you flip over a card that you've just experienced an event. And I think that's what they're going for here.
Yeah.
I guess I'm thinking of board games as a chore. I could see this game feeling more like a chore than it does.
Yeah.
Like a fun experience. And I want to stay away from those type of games more and more and more. So I don't know if, I could see if you're super invested in a theme and this is exactly what you want to do, then it might be worth it for you to go that deep and dig around and play in this huge, I don't know, these games ended up being like an exploration of theme and ability to move around and do all kinds of different things. So if that's what you're looking to do, this game could be awesome. But I don't know. I just don't want to, I don't have that kind of time to dedicate for learning rules, setting up.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. All right. So on my table has been Yokai Septet. This is getting a lot of hype lately because it's a trick-taking game, and I heard about it on, I think Dad's on a Map and Game Brain have talked about this on their trick-taking episodes lately. So I decided to go ahead and get this one. I liked the art, and it sounded like a pretty fun game. So It's a trick-taking game. There's the twist here is that there's 7 suits. You're trying to capture the 7 of each suit, and that's how you're going to score points throughout the course of the game. This game is basically a variant on Spades, if any of you out there have ever played Spades. So you're a partner, your partner's right across the table. I lost Chris already. Now he's like bowing out of here. He's like, I don't want to hear about this game anymore. I'm done. But your partners with the person across the table from you, and the teal to your left and right are your enemies. So at the beginning of the game, you get dealt these cards. You get to trade 3 cards across the table with your partner to try to set up the deck and gain what information you can from that. I think that's one of my favorite parts about Spades. You're like, oh, this guy passed me 2 clubs and a diamond. That must means he's short suited or he wants to get rid of this. So you have some information there about what you're going to play or what maybe your partner's going to try to take. So I love that aspect of the game. Unlike Spades, there's no bidding. You're not bidding on how many tricks you're going to try and take. All you're trying to do is take the 7s, and not all 7s are worth anything. Only some 7s are worth something. So as the game goes round and round, people get short suited. There's a trump suit. It's going to be different every game. There's get this, there's 50 cards in the game. So you deal out 7 cards to everybody. Is that right? In a 4-player game, you're dealing out all the cards. There's going to be 1 left over, and that's the trump suit. So do the math on that, whatever that works out to be. That card left over is going to be the most powerful suit in the game, except there's an A card in the green suit, which is weird. It was like the lowest card in the game, but also the highest card in the game. So that's kind of funky. Just wacky trick-taking rules that pop up in some of these games. Anyway, you're going through, trying to take 7, score the points. There's a couple weird, tricky rules at the end. If you've taken 7 tricks but have 3 or less 7s, then you lose. And as soon as somebody gets 4 of the 7s, that ends the round and you count the points. That's how it goes and goes and goes until you get, I don't know if it's 7 points or something, because 7s are like the favorite number in this card game. Anyway, you go round and round until it's better to pick like some arbitrary point total that you think is more fun to go to rather than just trying to get 7. It's probably going to be like whoever wins, 2 rounds is going to be the winner if you play it that way.
We don't want to hear about your house rules, Adam. What I want to hear about is the awesome artwork on these cards, because this is a trick-taking game, like basic, cards that have numbers on 2 corners of it, but instead of like a number in the middle, these actually have really cool Japanese style fantasy artwork in it. How did that play in person?
Yeah, I thought it was beautiful. The 7s are foiled, so they're all like glittery and gleamy. So immediately I sleeved all of these, and now they're not as fun to play with because they're all slippery and weird. I need to get the matted back or whatever. You're the Magic player. I mean, you got to tell me what kind of sleeves you use for this stuff. But yeah, the 7s are foiled, so they're beautiful and shiny, and they sparkle to help you remember that they're super important. So that's nice. And the art is fun. It's pretty whimsical. I like the art style, whatever it's called. I'm not sure what it's called, but I think it's beautiful. It adds a lot of flavor to the game, and it's a whole backstory about these 7s are actually yokai, and you're trying to get the boss yokai, and this doesn't make any sense. You're just trying to get the 7s is what the deal is, and it's beautiful.
But you said it's a team game, right? But it looks like you can actually play the 3 players as well. Have you looked at the rules on that?
There's a 3-player variant. No, I haven't looked at the rules on that, so I can't talk to that at all. Yeah.
Okay.
Great storytelling in the form of a trick-taking game. I just don't get that.
Well, sounds fun, Adam. Next time we're around together, I would love to play with you.
Great.
I'm sure Chris would not. I'm going to talk about 2 games, but they're very, very closely related. And I don't think I ever talked about the first one. So several months back, I was at an in-person game day, and I got a chance to play the Voyages of Marco Polo. This is designed by Simone Luciani and Daniele Tascini, who are 2 of our favorite Italian designers. And it was published back in 2015. It's a Euro, right? It's an ugly Euro, but it's really good. It's really, really good. It's basically, you've got, everyone starts on one side of the board, and it's this map, and you're trying to move around the board, and kind of as you drop trade houses in these different areas of the board, you unlock things. You either unlock new income or you unlock new dice worker placement spaces, because that's what this is. It's a dice worker placement game. At the beginning of the round, you roll 6 dice, and then you take those and you take turns placing them onto the spaces that are going to give you the resources you need to either move around the board or to fill orders, and orders are another thing that you can pick up. And it's just a very fun, tight Euro, with the thing that I think everyone likes to talk about here is that everyone starts with an asymmetric player power, and the asymmetric player powers break the game. Like, for example, it's a dice worker placement game. One of the player powers says you set the dice to whatever you want to at the beginning of the round. You don't have to worry about rolling it. Another one might say every time somebody else buys something from the market, one of the market spaces, you get a benefit as well. So they're just getting free resources. So I think that's kind of the gimmick in this. But the game is just a very good, tight kind of route building dice worker placement game. I had a lot of fun with it. It's on Board Game Arena, so I played it a decent amount since that first play. But this week I got a chance to play its follow-up, Marco Polo II in the Service of the Khan, which was designed by the same team and published in 2019. I think one of the complaints about the original game is that it is a very tight economy. It's very hard to move around the map. Everything feels like a struggle to get done. It seems like what they tried to do here was make things a little bit easier to do. And it is a little bit, and it adds complexity. It's kind of like we were talking about with Cyclades, how it feels of its time, a little bit simpler, and complexity has been added on. And Marco Polo 2 did that as well. They basically, there's more variability in the type of actions that are going to come up and change over the course of the game. There's an extra resource that costs you money to do things, but traveling through some of the routes are a little bit easier. If you want to get orders, you don't just go to one spot on the board. You actually have to build trade houses in places where you can pick up more orders. So it just adds a few little elements that add some complexity, but I think in a good way. I just had a really fun time playing. I played my first game on Board Game Arena this week of Marco Polo 2, and I think it's my preferred one of the two, even though the original game was fantastic and it's a little more streamlined, probably fewer rules you have to teach. But I just love the new version of it. I think it's just the extra choices, the way that the worker placement spaces change every round, and the way that you have to kind of move around to even pick up orders. Yeah, I don't know, fun game. You guys like these Italian designers sometimes. Do you think that you might enjoy this game? Or are you disinterested in trying it? Either of them, Marco Polo or Marco Polo 2.
I've heard so much about this game. I would love to try it to see what it's all about. Because I honestly have no idea if I'd like it. Dice placement usually is this kind of mechanism to me, but I still want to try it and see how it goes. What about you, Chris?
I'll try anything by these designers because there's been so many things they've done that I've enjoyed. And I do like dice placement. Honestly, when you were describing it, I'm like, is this going to be the same thing as Fabulous, whatever his name was?
Lorenzo El Magnifico.
Oh, yeah, Lorenzo El Magnifico. Is it going to be that?
Well, it's funny, Chris, because it actually shares some DNA with that, I think, in a way. But I don't fully understand what you didn't like about Lorenzo, to be honest. And so I think that's why I've kind of thought you guys might not like this too, because it is that same era dry Euro. And it does have dice worker placement just like that did. And I love Lorenzo. I like Lorenzo more than the first version of Marco Polo. After this first play, I really like what Marco Polo does, or Marco Polo 2 does. I would recommend, though, if you want to try this, try the original version, because the rule set's very streamlined. It's very clean game. It's tight and it's hard, right? It's a tough Euro. It's punishing Euro, but it's very streamlined and easy to teach. And then Marco Polo 2 adds some extra complexity that's going to make it a little bit heavier to teach, but I think more fun. So I would say start with the first one, see if you like it. But if for some reason you didn't like Lorenzo, I don't know why you would like Marco Polo. It is a little different, but it's got a lot of similarities.
So here's a question that I have. And this is the same question I have with so many of these games. Of all the things you could have made a game about, like, is Marco Polo really the best you can do? Like, I was just noticing there is a new game out by some of these designers. It's by Simone Luciani and Danilo Sabbia called The Rats of Wistar. Have either of you guys heard of this?
Nope, not familiar with it.
I want to hear about it. Please tell me more about it, Chris.
It is a Euro game where you are rats that escaped from some kind of a scientific institute, and you're like anthropomorphic and intelligent and trying to prove yourself worthy to lead the whole colony. And you're like taking over this house that people live in. And it's like, it looks whimsical and funny and, amusing. And it's got the pedigree of these great designers. And I'm like, now that's the game that makes me go, oh yeah, I want to try that. I want to find out more about what these rats are up to. I don't really need to find out what Marco Polo's up to. Just doesn't pull me in.
Fair enough, Chris. I mean, like, listen, if mechanisms are gonna make a game for you, then you can't go wrong with these designers. But if the theme is an important part of that game experience for you, then like there's any number of dry Euros are just not gonna, they're just not gonna cut it. It doesn't matter how good the mechanisms are. And so I think that's how Marco Polo is going to feel, just like Lorenzo did for you.
But I'm also open-minded about it. I mean, Agricola, whoever would have thought that I'd like Agricola? But anyway, I don't know. I'm open-minded about it. I'd like to try it, and maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised.
Chris, what's the name of that game again? The Rats of
Wistar.
Rats of Wistar.
Okay, so yeah, I'm looking at this. I'm trying to get into Marco Polo II, but again, Chris mentioned the theme. I'm going to go back to, I'm looking at these photos, and you see these people in clothes and the bright surroundings, and you look at the board, it looks like somebody smudged the film or the digital thing and brought it back to 1926 and got this sepia tone and put this hue of blood all over it and tried to just make it, and I don't know, maybe that's my own personal thing I need to get over, but add some saturation to your color palette, guys. Like, what is the deal? I get it. There's a nostalgia for that type of color scheme, and Tim's all about it, but that just is another hurdle for me to have to jump over in addition to a Marco Polo theme. But yeah, I'd love to try it.
Sure. We really don't mean to harsh your mellow, Tim.
No, I don't care. Hey, listen, I don't care. I've got other people to play these games with. To be clear, I'm not all about the pale color, the color. I don't get to choose, though, that these great designs are put onto bad themes and bad productions. But they're still fun games to me, so I can look past that and still enjoy the games in a way that maybe you guys have a little bit harder time doing sometimes. Anyway, that was Marco Polo and Marco Polo II, both fantastic games, and I'd be happy to play with either of you. Maybe we'll get a review in one of these days on one of these if I can get you guys to try one of them and you like it enough to give it another shot.
Totally.
Okay.
All right, cool. Well, that will wrap up this week's episode of Board Game Hot Takes. If you'd like to chat with us on social media, you can find us on our Facebook group. And it sounds like Adam just started a Mastodon site. I don't even know how Mastodon works.
I don't even know what it is. If anybody knows how to use it, if you can find us on there and tell me what to do. I don't know what's going on. So posted some pictures.
Go find Adam on Mastodon if you're on Mastodon and start chatting with him on there. Make him feel like he's needed, because somebody needs to run some other social media around here.
I've never even heard of it. Last I heard, that was like an Ice Age kind of elephant, right?
Right? I thought it was a dinosaur. I posted the wrong picture on Twitter. And then I had to repost that it was like an elephant. Whoops.
Oh my God, you guys are hilarious. All right. Well, until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.
Keep saying Megatropolis like that. That's where Megatron lives. Metropolis